Dynamite Chipos, man. I got this, yeah.
You can call a judge, tell him kiss my ass, cause I ain't gon' budge. And I ain't going back to lock up. You're trying to clock a pop up. I ain't going back to broke, and I'm never gonna stop the puffin'. Not for nothing. The block, they need me. The streets, they need me. The club scene, nigga, it's mine, believe me. You don't believe me? Can't be touched, can't be stopped, can't be moved, can't be rocked, can't be shook. We hot. When will you niggas learn? Came to get crunk, came to bring life, came to get started, came to get right. Turn down the music, turn up my mic. When will you niggas learn? Open your hearts for me, look what I got for you. You in the presence of greatness, I make it hot for you. Pass the rock to me, block it, I run with it. Here for the game and all the pussy that come with it. So full of focus, I'm insisting on keeping it going. The franchise, I exist in a league of my own. Expect attention, I'm familiar with being ignored. The true back, painted, locking and closing the door. Brick wall in the road, I won't move. The king, I'm like Roy in the ring, I can't lose. Show the face of what compare to man. You wanna walk? Motherfucker ain't hard to find. I holler back, nigga. Can't be touched, can't be stopped, can't be moved, can't be rocked, can't be shook. We hot. When will you niggas learn? Came to get crunk, came to bring life, came to get started, came to get right. Turn down the music, turn up my mic. When will you I move when my heart say move. Feels like a lion, got nothing to prove. Stubborn as a hot damn mule. God in my corner, nigga can't lose. Try to take me out my hot damn shoes. See how quick I drop up and get you bitches the blues. They gon' see you on the hot damn news. And I ain't leaving nothing. Linking me to the crime, not a print, not a hot damn clue. Beating these niggas down is what I came to do. And I ain't playing by a hot damn rule. Shaking you niggas down if you ain't paying your dues. We passing up your block and ooh. My screws are loose. Don't call my hand cause you gon' make me act a hot damn fool. Dead discussion, you will not win cause I will not lose. Can't be touched, can't be stopped, can't be moved, can't be rocked, can't be shook. We hot. When will you niggas learn? Came to get crunk, came to bring life, came to get started, came to get right. Turn down the music, turn up my mic. When will you niggas learn?
All right, y'all. Majestic is back tonight. Got some spooky shit for you guys. I can't wait. Looking forward to this one. Hey, Viper GTS, SJB, Dweller, Willow Angel, Doc, you stupid fuck. Turd Ferguson, James Cook. Let's see, Mary Hirsch. I think I saw it. I thought I saw you in here. I swore. Might be. Yep, I did. Stacy Steele. Roach Scholar. Probably not going to be passing out today. Let's see. Is anyone else? I think we're all here. Yeah, so let's get started, y'all. I got a good one today. Oh, yeah, Majestic is nursing one of the worst hangovers. Oh, man. But, let's see. I got a lot of good freaky shit. Let's see. I got a lot of animal encounters. Stories. And then I also have like a lot of unknown, like unexplained stuff. So, got a little mixture of a lot, and then also some serial, like uh, some serial killers. Um, so yeah, a lot. We have a lot of. I. This is gonna be a good one, guys. I will tell you that now. Anyways, so uh, if you guys haven't, hit the like and subscribe. Outdoor loser, you're my outdoor winner. And MC Sleeves. Nice for y'all to show, boy. Falcor's barely working liver. There it is. Uh, yeah. Yeah, it's barely. Barely there. So, anyways, just kidding. Get that. Oh, yeah, shit. Wrong one. Wrong screen. There we go. Boom. Then, Kadoom. Oh, yeah, hit that like, subscribe, y'all. Gonna do my special, what is it? I forgot what I was doing. Oh yeah, my 300 subscriber special tomorrow. So tomorrow night, and then I'll try to do like an all-nighter type thing or something like that. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyways, let's see. What should we start the day off with? Let's do. Man, I just have someone. Okay, let's start the night off with the fucking bang. This is Russia's sleep experiment. Ow, cat.
It turned out that he had physically torn his vocal cords from screaming incessantly. In the height of World War II, Russian scientists wanted to find a way to keep their soldiers awake longer. And so they devised this experiment, this human experiment, to test the effects of extreme sleep deprivation. And so what they did is they rounded up 5 prisoners of war and offered them their freedom if they went through this experiment, which I can tell you went sideways. And so the way it worked is they were going to be put inside of this sealed gas chamber that continuously was going to administer this stimulant gas. It was an experimental stimulant gas. This is not something they knew much about, but they were fairly confident that it wouldn't kill them and that it would keep them awake. And so they put them inside the chamber and they started administering the gas. This was not at a time where they had closed circuit cameras. Those weren't around at the time. All they had was, they put microphones in there. And they had these 5-inch thick little porthole windows. They had one porthole window where the researchers could look into the chamber itself. So the experiment begins, and really for the first 3-4 days, everything was pretty normal. At about the day 4 mark, the researchers started to notice a change in what they were discussing, the subjects. It went from kind of small talk over those first few days to fairly dark. They started talking almost exclusively about traumatic events that had happened to them in their life. And around the day 4 mark is when the subjects started complaining about being in this test at all. The first few days was filled with some optimism that this was their ticket out of
Bueno, bueno, bueno. Nice for you to stop by.
The terrible situation they were in, and then it really turned into, this is a terrible situation.
Yeah, that was, I didn't really expect doing that last night, but it was something that I wanted to get off my chest, and I knew it was gonna rile up some things, so, yeah. You should see the backlash I'm getting from it now.
I think it was around the day 6 mark, the subjects stopped talking to each other completely. They became paranoid of the other subjects.
For someone that's just standing up for what they believe in. Anyways.
And they went to
Enough of that talk. We're here to have fun.
their own sections of the chamber, You know, and in the chamber they had places to sit. There was food, there was water, there was a bathroom, there was books in there to read. They kind of took up space inside of the chamber. They began to believe that they could kind of like sell out their comrades in exchange for getting out of this experiment. So they would, you know, one by one come up to the porthole or go over to one of the microphones that was obviously placed inside the chamber and start whispering these kind of imagined offenses of the other subjects to try to get them in trouble in exchange for being released from this experiment, which, you know, that didn't do anything. You know, the researchers, they didn't care what they said. They just listened and watched. After 9 days, the experiment took a significant turn for the worst. It was the morning of I think it was the 10th day, where the screaming began. One of the test subjects began screaming. And at this point, everybody is totally like segregated. They're not talking to each other. They're muttering and whispering. And one of them just starts screaming. And so for 3 hours, they watch him scream at the top of his lungs and run back and forth across this little chamber until he stopped screaming, but he's still running. And they could kind of pick up on the microphone that he was still making sound, but it was like these little squeaks. It turned out that he had physically torn his vocal cords from screaming incessantly. The other subjects didn't react to the screaming at all. It was like it wasn't happening, but they're in this confined space, right? It's like so loud in there. And all that happened is, as he's screaming, the other subjects began ripping out pages of the book, soaking them, and then pushing them up against the porthole glass, obscuring the view. So by the time the subject who had torn his vocal cords stopped, well, by the time he tore his vocal cords and it went quiet.
Wow. Tore his vocal cords out. Holy shit.
The researchers couldn't actually see into the chamber anymore. And once the guy had torn his vocal cords, there was no more sound in the room. So their view was obscured, and now it's gone silent. After 3 days of talking about what they're going to do, of complete silence in the room. Like they can't see in, it's silent. They're monitoring the oxygen levels in the room, and based on oxygen consumption in the room, apparently they could tell that there were people in there, probably at least 4 or 5, that were breathing oxygen because it was being consumed. So they believed they were alive, but after 3 days of silence, which really didn't make any sense, they determined that, well, either our microphones are broken, and that's a problem, or there's something wrong with the subjects themselves. So they decide that they're going to use the intercom to reach out to the subjects and basically tell them that they're going to come into the room. Like, hey, you know, we're going to test the microphones. We're going to be coming into the chamber. You need to lay on the ground and not interact with us. If you comply, we will offer one of you.
Hey, that's where my cousin is stationed right now. Ramstein, Germany.
Immediate release and freedom. So there's silence after they use the intercom. They decide to do that. They talk through the intercom, and one of the subjects, now to this point again, for 3 days it's been silent. And one of the subjects, clear as can be, talks into the microphone and just says, "We no longer want to be freed." And so the researchers were like, okay, I guess they're alive and our microphones work, so they don't go in. They stay out of the chamber. Silence continues all the way up until the 15th day because, you know, the window's still obscured. The subjects are not speaking, they're not muttering, they're not whispering, it's just silence. And on the 15th day, at midnight on the 15th day, they decide that the experiment was over. And so what they did is they flushed the room of the stimulant that had been continuously pouring into the room. They turned that off, and they replaced it with fresh air. And that's when they started hearing these.
Hey, Eel! Nice for you to stop by, my bud. Come on, brother!
Screaming from the subjects inside of the chamber.
Brother!
They were begging them, the researchers, to turn the gas back on.
Oh, yeah.
Pleading with them, like begging, please turn it back on, as if they were dying. And then they opened the chamber, and now they're laying eyes on the chamber for the first time since like the 10th day. So it's been like 5 days. And they're seeing the chamber with their own eyes for the first time. And it's straight out of a horror scene. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive. The 5th subject, who had perished at some point, there was chunks of flesh that had been taken off of his chest and his leg and had been jammed into the drain in the center of the room. And they had turned on the water in the bathroom and had flooded the room. There was almost 4 inches of water on the ground, like murky, stagnant, like, you know, lots of gross stuff in their water all over the ground. And there's this dead subject. And all 4 of them have also, there's chunks of their own flesh that's been ripped off of their body. And it was later determined that it was self-inflicted, these chunks of
Jesus Christ.
off of them. And it was not by teeth either, it was by hand. And also they were eating it. So they were ripping off pieces of their body and eating.
Yeah, I am, Eel. I'm doing my 300 subscribe party tomorrow night.
Eating it. The food storage that was down there hadn't been touched in days. It was like they had all completely lost their mind and began eating themselves. These subjects did not want to leave the chamber. They just continued to beg for the gas to be turned back on. And so finally they brought in some soldiers to actually extract the living subjects out of the chamber, but they fought so aggressively to stay there.
Holy shit.
And in fact, one of the subjects jumped up and bit the neck of one of the soldiers, and he actually bled to death. Also, one of the subjects in the struggle, his spleen ruptured and he bled to death. So now you have 2 casualties just getting them out of the room. They finally get the 3 remaining subjects, living subjects, out of the room, and they heavily restrain them. They bring them to a medical facility because they need to go under surgery because they've had chunks of their own flesh ripped off. They're totally emaciated. And the most injured of the 3 is immediately brought into surgery, while the other 2 were just kind of held in a holding room. And they try to give him a sedative in order to prepare him for surgery. This is not the anesthetic. This is just the sedative. And it's like he's immune to it. You know, they give him a sedative, it does nothing. And he's just like resisting them, and he keeps begging to go back under the gas. And then finally they say, okay, well, we're just going to give him the anesthetic now. And when they bring it out and they tell him, we're going to give you an anesthetic and we're going to give you the surgery, he starts viciously fighting back. He does not want the anesthetic. He's pleading for them not to give him the anesthetic, that he must remain awake. He needs to remain awake, put me back under the gas. And in his struggle to not have the anesthetic given to him, he manages to tear one of the leather straps that was holding him down. So like an extreme amount of force. And then...
No, this happened in, this is Russia's sleeping experiment that happened. But close to
finally, when they give him the anesthetic, and they had to give him like 10 times the dosage or whatever just to get him to calm down, as soon as he fell asleep, he died. So after he passes away, they
no bueno.
move on to the next worst off subject, the guy who had torn his vocal cords and couldn't speak. They bring him in for surgery, and
good lord, just imagine that, this getting injected with like all this stuff and like you can't sleep. Oh my God. Jesus.
He can't speak, but he's shaking his head because he doesn't want the anesthetic. He doesn't want to go under surgery, and he's fighting with them. And he actually just passes out from exhaustion. And he too, once he falls asleep, or I guess falls unconscious, he dies as well. So now there's only 1 subject left. The other 2 that had lived to be pulled out of the chamber have now died as soon as they fell asleep, and the scientists don't have any idea why. Instead of bringing the last survivor into surgery, because now they've witnessed 2 surgeries end in...
Hey, evil little McNuggets, nice for you to stop by. Thanks for everyone to stop by.
Death, they decide, let's put this guy back in the chamber and turn the gas back on, because apparently that's the one thing that's keeping these guys alive. And so in preparation for being put back into the chamber, they hooked him up with an EEG that basically measures your brain waves, which I guess they hadn't done to this point in the experiment. And so they put him in there, and the scientists are watching the readout of the EEG, and they noticed that like his lines would just, you know, inexplicably flatline and then go back to you know, up and down and then flatline again. And one of them had the wherewithal to look at the subject as it's flatlining, and they could see that every time he closed his eyes, it was like he was micro-sleeping, like these little blinks. Basically, every time he fell asleep for like a fraction of a second, it was like he was suffering a brain death over and over.
So basically, anytime he's sleeping, he's dying.
over
Jesus
again.
Christ.
And as they're monitoring this, and they know what just happened to the other two. They died when they fell asleep. They're trying to rush to get the gas turned back on to keep this guy alive, but they didn't do it in time, and he eventually succumbs and falls asleep. And they can see
One of those weirdos. What's up, man? Thanks for to stop by.
Before he ultimately dies, that initially when he finally fell asleep, the EEG showed that he had fallen into a deep sleep, and then he flatlined and his heart stopped and he died. All of the subjects died, and no one really knows what killed them. Was it the sleep deprivation? Was it the gas? It could be a mixture of the two, but we'll never know. But either way, all of them died. Now, this is actually just a story, and there's no evidence to suggest that it's even true. But during that time frame in the 40s, during World War II, there were known cases of horrific, unethical human experimentation happening, like in the Japanese, that awful Unit 731. I would not suggest Googling that unless you got a really strong stomach. You had in the concentration camps, the German concentration camps, human experimentation was definitely happening.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll turn up the volume. I'm sorry. I am sorry. My bad, y'all.
And obviously, Germany and Japan are not Russia, but it was just in this era where human experimentation was definitely happening. So even if this particular story, the Russian sleep experiment, is not true,
let me know if the volume is a lot better.
I wouldn't be shocked in the least if there wasn't a similar study done somewhere. Obviously, the results could vary dramatically, but I do think that it's certainly possible that something like this could have happened. We continue to study sleep and sleep deprivation, and really there's not much known about it. We don't even really know why we sleep, but we do know that you will die if you go without sleep. I think the longest any human went without sleep was like 18 days. And I can actually speak from my own experience. I was a Navy SEAL for 7 years, and we go through something called
Look at that badass mofo. Look at that Mr. Ballin guy. Look at that guy.
Hell Week in initial training, where over a
God, look how young he is. He looks like he's 16.
period of 5.5 days, you sleep for a total of 4 hours. Not every night 4 hours, but a grand total of 4 hours. And it's split up into two little chunks.
Yeah, this was like in the 40s or whatnot. They took some prisoners of war, I think, and experimented on them. Or I wasn't really listening to the story. Or they were volunteers they were quote unquote volunteers, probably. Russian soldiers. So, yeah.
2 hours and 2 hours, and then there's like a 15-minute and 15-minute nap thrown in there too. And you really just lose your mind after 72 hours. I remember I was constantly hallucinating that when I was around my classmates, their head would turn into a big Rubik's Cube and start flipping around, and even when I got right next to them, their head would still be flopping around like a Rubik's Cube. And that's only 72 hours in. I can only imagine what would happen at 15 days. So that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed the
Jesus. Anyways. Yeah, that was what I was starting the day off with. Is this one. God, speaking of chimpanzee, one of those weirdos, I got one. Yeah, I got a good one for you. Since you went on a chimpanzee thing, I got a good one for you, my friend. This is off of Unexplained Mysteries channel. You'll love this one. One of those weirdos. It's a new species of ape. It's called the Bondo. The Bondo ape. They're called AKA lion killers. They walk on two legs, and they're known as lion killers, yeah. They're like 6 feet tall.
Chimpanzees are perhaps best known for being our closest relation on Earth. It's not hard to see why. We look very alike, and scientists have been able to work out that we share around 94 to 98% of DNA with them. With that being said though, we're still very different. Observing these animals has given us an insight into their behaviour, and how they act in their natural environment.
And we're gonna have like the Planet of the Apes here. Like, for real. Apparently, some scientists think that they've entered what they call the Stone Age.
They've also been observed showing strong emotions and growing bonds with each other, very similar to what us humans do. Chimpanzees are known to be calm creatures, and over the years humans have been able to get close to them and even interact with them. Although it's frowned upon, some people have successfully kept them as pets, and haven't had any issues, whereas others have tried this and have felt the full strength of one of these creatures. They belong in the wild where they can naturally interact with other members of their species. In fact, studies have shown this is very important for their development and behaviour. However, even in the wild they have been described as being highly territorial. Some wildlife specialists have said that if a rival chimp comes into their territory, they will have a large increase of aggression and won't be afraid to show this. One group of chimps, however, has become known for its brute strength and aggression. This chimp is known as the billy ape. What's interesting
Scale Long Johnson, nice for you to stop by.
about this creature is that we don't know much about it, and at one point in time it wasn't even believed to have existed. Many scientists and researchers suggested that the billy ape was nothing more than a myth, or even a made-up cryptid. But when researchers made their way into the Billy Forest, which can be found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, they discovered that this ape is very much real. In fact, the locals of this region would talk about a large ape that inhabited the area, but the difference with this ape when compared to others is that it seemed larger and more aggressive. Researchers have been able to find out that the billy ape is closely related to the eastern chimpanzee. While explorers were making their way through the region, they were able to find out there are two different groups of these apes. There are some that have become known as the tree climbers, and this is because when humans are around they
And their skull too, they have like a crest. Like you don't see it, but when you act there's like a crest. Like in like how gorillas have, like right up here. It's like almost like a mohawk.
They can be observed quickly climbing a tree and looking for cover. This is because the locals of the region use darts to bring them down. If one of these chimps are hit with these darts, they succumb to their injuries. This is because the darts are usually covered with a type of poison. What's interesting though is the other group of billy apes are known as the lion killers. These have gotten the name because they are much larger in size compared to the tree climbers, and when the locals have tried to hit them with the darts it has no effect on them. One of the first encounters with these billy apes goes back to 1996. This was when Carl Ammann, a Swiss photographer, visited the Billy region. At the time he had no idea that the billy apes inhabited the region, and was actually looking for gorillas. While walking through the dense forested area he wasn't able to locate any gorillas, but he was able to find a strange looking skull. It was strange due to the fact that it was around the same size of a chimpanzee, but had a prominent crest that was very similar to that of a gorilla.
Yeah, see?
Fast forward over 5 years later and researchers were able to conduct more studies in the region of the Congo. One scientist said that while in the region they felt unsafe as these apes didn't seem fazed by humans. In fact, they even described one instance where one of the apes ran towards them. This wasn't done with the normal vocalizations either, which made the scientists more on edge as they had done this with confidence rather than trying to call their bluff.
Hey,
However,
Billy the
as
Kid.
these apes
Hey, Billy the Kid, nice for you to stop by. Thank you. Yeah, nursing one of the worst hangovers. Oh, yeah, I got knocked out like fucking Mike Tyson hit me in his prime.
apes approached, something seemed off, as when they made eye contact they seemed confused and slowly started to walk off. The scientists and researchers describe these apes as being much larger than a normal chimp, not just in height but in overall bulk. One thing that researchers have picked up on while studying the apes is that their behaviour seems off. For example, one researcher described them as behaving more like gorillas than chimpanzees. This could be seen in the way they build their nests and interact with the environment around them. Another thing they said is that their behaviour towards humans is much different compared to other apes.
You can watch some bare knuckle. You can watch some bare knuckle fights.
There is no fear when they meet us face to face. They don't show any sign of feeling intimidated. For example, when humans have gotten close to a silverback gorilla, they will usually thump their hands on the ground or even charge in order to show dominance. There isn't any of that with these apes.
Dude, just imagine coming across like a 6-foot ape. Oh my god. That's stronger than most bodybuild. That's stronger than a bodybuilder. And oh my god.
Which in fact is more frightening as they don't see humans as a threat.
This scares the shit out of me.
This shows confidence in the fact that these apes don't feel like they need to show off in front of us, as clearly we wouldn't be a match for them if they did want to take us on. Although these apes look much bigger in real life, this was confirmed when researchers were able to study remains of their skulls. It turned out that one individual had a skull measuring over 225mm. When compared to a common chimpanzees who have an average skull of 185 to 200mm, this gives you an idea of how much larger these creatures are. The truth is that at this moment in time, researchers and scientists don't really know much about this elusive creature.
Hey Ellie! Nice for you to stop by! I didn't see you sneak in there, I'm sorry.
One interesting idea that's been put
Or did you just show up? Hopefully I didn't miss you. Oh shit. Hopefully I didn't.
Is that these creatures could be behind some of the local tales of large humanoids. The locals have described seeing large humanoids that they've described as looking different from typical chimps, and it's now believed that Billy Ape is responsible for the sightings. In fact, recently we talked about a bizarre creature known as the spiny-backed chimpanzee. This mysterious humanoid has been reportedly seen in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's suggested by some theorists that the Billy Ape is closely related to these creatures. This ape is described as being large in size, having a broad face, not making much noise and not being afraid of humans. Unlike other
Kangaroo, nice for you to stop by.
in the area, the alleged sightings of this mysterious creature are quite recent. The creature has been around for the last few decades and everybody who encounters it describes the same thing. According to one encounter by a Navy officer who wanted to remain anonymous,
These are fascinating animals though.
his unit encountered 3 strange bipedal chimpanzees. The group of chimpanzees was trying to take down other animals. They were 4 to 6 feet tall and had a grey colour.
Dude, that would be fucking wild to see in the wild.
However, the most distinctive feature of these chimpanzees
Being like, what the fuck?
was the series of spines on their back.
Being like,
Whenever these mysterious
happening?
animals became
It's like,
agitated,
look at that thing.
the spines on their back stood up like a porcupine's quills. The Navy officer also stated that his team members made a 3-minute video of these strange animals, but that video was never released to the public and still remains a military secret. The officers did not tell the exact location of the sighting. However, it's believed the sighting was made somewhere near the Lake Tanganyika in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Spiny-backed chimpanzees is one of the strangest creatures ever reported, and the researchers believe the jungles of Africa could potentially host hundreds of unexplored species. The spiny-backed chimpanzee could be an undiscovered species with very little population, and could very well be extinct by now. Some have linked this creature to the Billy Ape, and have suggested it's the same thing. The only thing that's different about this creature and the Billy Ape is that of the spines. However, as some have pointed out, the Billy Ape was once thought to be a cryptid and not a real creature. But fast forward a couple of decades and scientists were able to prove that it was in fact a real animal. Some have suggested that the same thing could happen with the spiny-backed chimpanzee, There are many areas of the Congo that haven't been explored, and somewhere out there could be lurking a species of apes that match the description of the spiny-backed chimpanzees. As of today, the Congo is one of the places that has reported the most mysterious creatures. Some have even given it the name of Earth's real-life Jurassic Park. Another famous creature that's yet identified by science is that of the Mekele Membe, or known in its native language as the one who stops the flow of rivers. The design of this creature is similar to that of a sauropod dinosaur, a tall dinosaur-like creature with a long neck and a larger flowing tail to match. The size of its body is similar to that of a hippopotamus up to an elephant, and has a neck reportedly longer than 8 meters in length. The reports out of the Congo River basin claim the creature stands more than 50 feet in length, and hides in a thick frosted location.
Yeah, that's another thing that they think is like a brontosaurus.
Locations all throughout the northernmost part of the Congo. Legends and sightings of the creature go back thousands of years according to the native tribes in the region, and reports of the creature range all the way up to the modern day, with even a group of French priests that travelled through the region confirming the sighting of this modern day dinosaur. So my question to you guys is, what do you make of the Billy Ape?
Well, it's definitely real. It's fucking scary. Right. Let's get into some sharks. Yeah, I got a shark story right here.
In the treacherous waters of Cape Howe, Australia, Eric Nurhus, a seasoned abalone diver, and his son
Hey, salty robot, nice for you to stop by.
Mark would on a fateful day in January of 2007 find themselves facing the unimaginable during a routine dive. Ironically enough, Mark had a nagging intuition that something wasn't quite right, but neither of them could have anticipated the life-changing encounter with a great white shark that lay ahead. This is the harrowing true story of Eric Nurhus' gruesome encounter with one of our ocean's most formidable predators. The region around Cape Howe is known for its diverse and unique wildlife. The nearby waters host a variety of marine life, including whales, dolphins, seals, and various species of fish. The beaches and coastal dunes are home to a range of bird species, including the threatened hooded plover and the eastern bristlebird. Not to mention the surrounding forests are also home to a variety of animals including kangaroos, wallabies, echidnas, and possums. The region is particularly important for its populations of threatened species, such as the long-nosed potteroo, the spotted-tailed quoll, and the majestic owl. The strong currents of Cape Howe are known for attracting fish.
Oh, look at that!
And the majestic owl.
The what?
Such as the long-nosed potteroo, the spotted-tailed quoll, and the majestic owl. The strong-nosed potteroo, the spotted-tailed quoll, and the majestic owl. The strong currents of Cape Howe are known for attracting fish and the seals that feed on them, which of course is a favorite meal of none other than the great white shark. As the top predator in these waters, great whites are undoubtedly a force to be reckoned with and are perfectly adapted for their roles in the food chain. On Tuesday morning of January 23, 2007, Eric Nurhus and his 25-year-old son Mark, joined by a group of fellow divers, embarked on an underwater adventure in the Tasman Sea. Their destination was Cape Howe, a captivating spot situated roughly 250 miles south of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. The spot was one that Eric was very much familiar with, and was specifically located on the northern side of Cape Howe in New South Wales. Eric had been submerged in approximately 26 feet of water, intently following trail of abalone on the sea floor, which lay atop the coral reef. He would during this time focus on ensuring that the abalone was of the proper size, diligently examining each specimen. Once gathered, he'd then place the abalone into a bag and send it up to Mark on the boat right above him. Descending into the depths, Eric moved gracefully among the boulders and kelp, expertly collecting abalone, and it wasn't long before he would fill his first bag and send it up to Mark, who was diligently following his father's air bubbles. Despite the lurking danger, a carefree Eric found himself lulled into a peaceful daydream by the hum of his regulator. That tranquility was shattered when, without warning, Eric was hit with a force so immense he thought he'd been struck by a truck underwater.
1 second it was daylight, the next second everything went black, and a really nasty
Damn. Yeah, that
Device
fucking
like
hell
Brett.
shark. God damn, it went head first. Well, there goes your head.
pressure crushing my chest and upper back, and I wasn't really sure what had
Oh
actually
my god.
happened to me.
And it was at this point that he would realize that his head
And at this point, I knew I fucked up. Sorry, that was the worst.
and shoulders were gripped between the jaws of a 10-foot great white shark. Aided by a surge of adrenaline, Eric's survival instincts then kick in. With one arm trapped in the shark's mouth, he uses his free hand to gouge at the shark's eye. With its razor-sharp teeth unable to penetrate Eric's lead diving vest, the animal would, regardless of this, continue its brutal attack, shaking Eric back and forth in an attempt to saw through his body, as it often does when attempting to rip chunks of blubber and
Damn, that shark was determined.
fat off of its prey. Fearing the worst, Eric continued to fight back, focusing on inflicting as much pain as he possibly could on the shark. This was when, to his amazement, the shark would suddenly release him, but to his horror, the shark did not retreat, but instead began circling him, waiting for him to weaken further before coming in for the final blow, a tactic they often use when hunting seals. According to shark experts, sharks may circle their prey and wait for them to bleed out because it conserves energy and minimizes the risk of injury. Sharks have a limited energy reserve, and chasing prey can be energetically costly, especially for larger prey. By circling prey, the shark can monitor it and wait for it to become weakened from loss of blood or injury, making it easier to kill and consume. This behavior may also minimize the risk of injury to the shark, as the prey becomes weaker and less capable of defending itself. And interestingly, circling behavior may be a way for the shark to assess the potential risk and value of its prey. By observing the prey's behavior and assessing its injuries, the shark can determine whether the prey is worth the effort and/or the risk of attacking. It's also important to note that not all shark species exhibit this behavior, and the behavior can vary depending on the species, prey, and environmental conditions. Determined to survive, Eric then makes the difficult decision to swim to the surface, knowing that any sudden movement could provoke the shark to strike again. He spreads his arms and legs wide, hoping to appear less like a seal and more like an unfamiliar creature. Like something out of a horror movie, upon breaking the surface, Eric would spot the
Probably circling.
menacing blackish blue eyes of the great white creeping in from just below him and circling his flippers. And as fear coursed through his body in the form of yet another surge of adrenaline, he would then call out to Mark at the top of his lungs,
The fucking probably.
who quickly helped him out of the water before the shark could strike again.
Yeah, because I was getting ready to.
A snowy hydro rescue helicopter would arrive at the scene, and Eric would be transported to the Wollongong Hospital instead of the closer Canberra facility, a decision which was made in order to allow the helicopter to maintain a lower altitude during the flight, preventing patients from experiencing decompression sickness, which often occurs when nitrogen bubbles form in the bloodstream, much like when one ascends too quickly when scuba diving. Upon receiving Eric, a snowy hydro rescue person noted that he was conscious and alert, but exhibited a broken nose and lacerations on both sides of his torso and chest, consistent with bite marks. The hospital reported Eric to be in serious but stable condition, with his injuries requiring a total of 75 stitches. Miraculously, Eric would go on to survive the attack, though his wounds were extensive. He had suffered a broken arm, a broken nose, and had 4 of the great white's teeth embedded in the back of his skull. Reflecting on his close call, Eric would go on to state that had it not been for his lead weight vest, he likely wouldn't be alive, and it was what saved him from what was sure to be a
Right here. I'm still here.
much more gruesome and likely lethal shark bite. Grateful for his second chance at life,
I'm just listening to the story right now.
Eric eventually left abalone fishing to work as a security officer on dry land. Shark attacks are not uncommon in Australian waters, with an average of 15 attacks occurring each year, and statistics show that at least one of those is likely to be fatal.
He's an oceanic white tip.
and attacked specifically by great whites, which breed in the cold southern waters of Australia, are particularly dangerous due to their sheer size. Sharks are apex predators and play a vital role in maintaining the balance of marine ecosystems.
Look at that nurse shark.
However, interactions between humans and sharks have the potential to be dangerous and even deadly. While shark attacks are rare, they still do occur.
This video scares the shit out of me. Like this great white, look at how well this, like, the shark blends in. Like literally this shark appears out of nowhere and bops the guy on the back of the head, like the top of his head, with his mouth. Oh my god. You would have been seeing a brown cloud, right? I would have shit in that wetsuit. I would have shit my pants.
And the consequences, of course, can be severe, as this channel is covered in several other episodes. In addition to the physical harm caused by an attack, the fear and trauma associated with the experience can also have lasting psychological effects. By exercising caution when swimming in these waters and following safety guidelines, such as avoiding swimming during dusk and dawn when sharks are most active, staying in groups, and not wearing shiny jewelry, individuals can help minimize the risk of encountering a curious shark. Eric's experience serves as a stark reminder of the power and unpredictability of nature, and though shark attacks are rare, they undoubtedly can still occur, and being prepared for the
Did you survive your attack with the cougar?
unexpected is vital. With
Look at that black tip reef shark.
determination and a will to survive, Eric Nearest overcame the odds and lived
Good lord, look at that.
to tell his incredible
Man.
story.
Being given a second chance, it makes a great deal of difference to your life, and all of a sudden you start to appreciate things that you didn't even think about before.
When knowing that I could have lost the best thing in my life, and like, I just don't know how to say it. Like, there's no words that can literally say it.
If this video piqued your interest, then our
I'm going to move on from that one and pick another one. Pick another call. Let's see. Let's go with. All right. Let's pick. Got a lot of good stuff. Let's do this one, Mr. Ballin.
One
It's about the exorcism of Emily Rose, about the real story.
of the most terrifying movies I have ever seen has got to be The Exorcism of Emily Rose. What really made it scary was that it was based on a true story. The true story of Anneliese Michel, who was a 23-year-old girl living in Germany in the 70s.
Oh yeah, yeah, yes. SJB. Sharks do have blowholes. They just have it in a weird spot.
It was apparently possessed by demons, and there's a lot of audio recordings and some pretty incredible firsthand testimony of what happened to this poor girl. There's one scene in particular that, while it is a dramatization of what happened to Anneliese, it is certainly an accurate portrayal of what did ultimately physically happen to Anneliese Michel, and it is one of the most hair-raising, horrifying scenes in movie history, in my opinion. It is just downright disturbing. And so today, I'm going to be looking at the real story that movie is based on, which is, of course, the exorcism of Anneliese Michel. But before we get into today's story, if you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, well, then you've come to the right channel, because that is literally all I do. And I upload 3, sometimes 4 times every week. So if that's of interest,
Yeah, Yeah, my boy's here, Decon. He's here. Oh, what's up, brother?
Interest to you, if you could,
Nice for you to stop by.
please gently eviscerate the like button and then subscribe and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's dive in. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Western Germany to a fiercely religious family. Devout Catholics who believed in some of the more extreme elements of the Catholic faith. Now, one of the things that they believed in and certainly pushed on to Anneliese and her siblings was this idea that sin could not be atoned on your own. It would require other people effectively sacrificing on your behalf for you to be absolved of your sin. And so Anneliese and her siblings would be instructed by her parents to, at times in the winter, sleep on the hardwood floor in order to repent for sinners that can't repent for their sins on their own. And so she'd be laying on the floor in the middle of the winter, thinking that what she was doing was saving.
How about hit the like button with your blowholes for me, guys? Hit my like button with your blowholes.
Saving other people from their own sin.
And don't forget to subscribe, y'all.
In 1969, Anneliese would have her first seizure. She was at school, she suddenly started seizing up and convulsing, and her classmates would later tell investigators and her family that it was almost like she'd entered into a trance-like state while she was having this seizure. And then as soon as the seizure had ended and she was done convulsing, she snapped out of the trance-like state. It wasn't until a year later when Anneliese had another seizure in the middle of the night. She had this convulsion and her parents come in and she's in this trance-like state and she's wet the bed and then she snaps out of it and she doesn't know what happened. It wasn't until this second seizure that the family actually sought medical attention. They actually went to a neurologist. That neurologist would tell Anneliese and her family that what she was suffering from was something called temporal lobe epilepsy, where, you know, amongst a litany of horrible side effects, a few of the more significant ones are serious auditory and visual hallucinations, a loss of awareness, and intense mental state. So Anneliese was prescribed.
Hey, Turd Ferguson, nice for you to stop by, my friend. I think I said hi to you earlier. Hopefully I did. If not, I'm sorry, brother.
Medication by this neurologist to try to combat this temporal lobe epilepsy, but it didn't seem to do anything. And in fact, her seizures and convulsions and this trance-like state she would go into during the seizures, it only persisted and intensified. And it got to a point where Anneliese and her family believed the best thing for her to do would be to go to a psychiatric hospital where the staff there was better equipped to handle what was happening to her. And so she checks in willingly, and they start experimenting with different drugs, and nothing seems to work. And in fact, her condition only gets worse. She starts having more seizures and more convulsions, and she starts having a regular visual hallucination, whether she's having a seizure or not. Everywhere she looked, if she looked at anybody in the face, their face would become demonic. Like it would be a demon's face that would look at her and say, "You're going to rot in hell." And so she began not being able to look at people in the face, and she would tell the nurses and doctors, like with her head down, about these demon faces she was seeing. And it was the first time she began espousing this idea that she was in fact possessed by demons. In fact, 6 demons by her count. When she passed on that information to her family that she believed she was possessed, she and her family believed that the psychiatric hospital was not enough. And in fact, modern medicine was really not enough to handle what was happening to her, that they would need to search for help outside of medicine, and so they turned to the Catholic Church. Initially, all the clergy that Anneliese and her family approached to try to help her with the situation rejected her request, and they said, "You need to seek medical attention. This is not something we can help you with." Not knowing where to turn, her family is kind of at a loss. At the same time, Annaliese's condition really nosedives. I mean, it was already pretty bad. It gets a lot worse. She began...
I'm not sure if you guys seen the movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It's a pretty good one. It scares the shit out of me sometimes.
And doing...
There's a couple scenes in that movie that kind of freaked me out.
400 plus squats every day, like compulsively doing squats. Then she began
Jesus.
Going under the table periodically and not coming out for 2 days barking like a dog the entire time without sleeping. She began going to corners of the house and finding spiders and eating them off the ground. She would scurry over to the fireplace and pull coal out of the fireplace and eat the coal. I mean, she was really losing it. Finally, the family located a priest named Ernst Alt who believed she was possessed and that she was not epileptic, and he was willing to petition the local bishop to allow the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism. And so that bishop granted permission for a local priest, Arnold Renz, to perform an exorcism with the full endorsement of the Catholic Church. Over the next 10 months, Renz would conduct 67 exorcisms.
Yes, sir, Decon. Decon, I will be on your stream Thursday, my brother, from another mother.
Exorcisms of Annalise. And through these exorcisms, Annalise would reveal that she was being possessed by 6 demons: Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Nero, Fleischmann, and Adolf Hitler. And so all of these voices, these demonic voices that were coming out of Annalise, they were picked up on audio recording during the exorcisms. And in the movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose,
I have it all the way up, homie. James Cook. Where's it? Can you guys not hear it? That the good old plug in, plug out. Plug it out, plug it in.
the most iconic scene in the movie is the demon scene where they show off these voices coming out of, in the movie it's Emily Rose, but it's supposed to represent Annalise Michel. And they do a fantastic job showing what that might have looked like during the exorcism. So take a look.
Give me your name, demon!
Yeah, this is one of the scenes that kind of freaked me out.
Names! Moderator of the army of Shashika! You
Ancient serpents! Depart from this servant of God!
Oh my god.
Tell me your 6 names!
We are the ones who dwell within. You shoshohen betong Queen Hobby Tobbit in Roy case of paraffin and you die.
Oh my god. Is that her eyes glowing?
And I am Lucifer, the devil in the flesh.
Dude. Horses are fucking freaking out too.
And now I want you to take that scene you just watched of Emily Rose
I don't want to.
being possessed by these demons and think about that as you listen to the actual audio recordings of Annalise Michel during one of her many
Here we go, y'all. Here's the actual recording.
exorcisms.
Ja, ich will auch für die anderen leiden, damit die nicht in die Hölle kommen und so. Aber dass das dann so schlimm ist und so grausam und so furchtbar, nee.
Ihr Klötze! Nein, ihr Klötze! Und der Maul, ihr Klötze! Oh, so der Hanne Milane, doch! Ich hab ein Maul erschlagen! Die Ruhe! Ruhe gibt's nur da oben!
Ruhe gibt's nur dort, wo die Liebe ist.
Ja, bei uns gibt's nur ja nun.
Jesus.
Die müssen in eigenen Seminaren ausgebildet werden, die dürfen nicht auf die anderen Universitäten. Kapiert? Nein,
Decan, we can talk about whatever. I'm open. Doesn't have to be Lauren related stuff. Could be like, I don't know. Could be whatever. I'm open. We can do like cryptid or like paranormal talk. Be like, yeah, hey brother, it'll be fun. Or we can do Lauren again, like always, like again. But yeah, like I said, I'm pretty open or whatever.
Initially, the exorcisms
Yeah, Lauren cryptid. Yeah, we can do that.
seemed to make things better for Annalise. She got to a place where the seizures and convulsions and trance-like states and odd behavior were so few and far between that she actually re-enrolled in university and was even able to attend church, but it didn't last. In the spring of 1976, Annalise's convulsions and seizures and odd behavior came back tenfold, and she began becoming violent with her family members to where they couldn't even be around her without being attacked by her. But when she was left on her own, she would harm herself. She stopped eating, saying that the demons were not allowing her to eat, and all day long she would stand up and then drop to her knees to pray, and then get back up and drop to her knees to pray, breaking both her kneecaps and tearing the tendons in her knees, which seemingly did not faze her. But still, her family believed that what she needed was religious intervention, not medical intervention. Also, Annalise felt the same way, but some might say that she was not in a position to make that decision, that she had lost her ability to make that decision. But either way, they continued with the exorcisms.
Dakan, that would be awesome to have like a cartel camp where you live. That'd be awesome, bro.
The final exorcism of Annalise took place on June 30th, 1976, and while Annalise did submit willingly to this exorcism, she was incredibly frail. She weighed under 100 pounds.
Hey, George Glasson Bunny.
And by the
nice for y'all to stop. Excuse me, Jesus. Nice for y'all to stop, boy.
Following morning on July 1st, 1976, she had passed away due to dehydration and malnutrition. She was only 23 years old. After her death, Annalise's story was so sensational that it grabbed headlines all over Germany, and people were clamoring to learn more about how this could happen. That she was, apparently possessed and then died after all these exorcisms. Why wasn't there medical intervention? There was so many questions. And so ultimately what happened is her parents were charged with negligent homicide, but were actually not given a jail sentence because at the time in Germany, they ruled that the parents had already suffered enough, so they did not serve any jail time. And there were two priests, one of them being
Hey, Jugga Willie, nice for you to stop, boy.
Renz, who were charged with negligent manslaughter, and they were sentenced to 6 months in jail. That was later suspended. To this day, people are absolutely split down the middle about what actually happened to Annalise Michel. Was it possession, or was it, like the neurologist said, a form of epilepsy, or was it something else? And furthermore, was psychiatric treatment or was modern medicine doing enough to help her? Or were they failing just as much as the exorcisms ultimately failed? It's a question that to this day people are really unsure how to answer. Her gravesite has become sort of like a monument for many churches around Europe. They will go and basically make the pilgrimage to her gravesite to pay their respects to a girl that they believe in some way died for their sins. So what do you think this was? Was this demonic possession, or was this epilepsy? Or was it something else? And how do you think they should have treated this case? I mean, obviously the medication she was on was not making it any better, but at the same time, the exorcisms didn't seem to do much better either. So how do you treat something like this? Let me know in the comments what you think, and
that's where your hands are kind of, that's like that gray area.
I'll do my best to respond to as many as I possibly can. All right, that's going to do it, guys. If you were interested in this story.
Ooh, since I have Dakan here, I have a Marine story today, too. Where is it? Ah, here it is. It's another Mr. Ballin. Possibly fought a ghost, I think. There you go.
The paranormal does not really have a place in the military, despite what anybody tells you. It's just not something that gets discussed. Now, I was a bit of an anomaly. I was in the Navy for 7 years. 5 of those years were spent on a SEAL team, and maybe because we were in such small teams, people had to put up with my weirdness and my interest in, the strange happenings around the world. But, really that was an anomaly. And I think it comes from the culture inside the military where you have a group of people that has such a intense job that's so rooted on practical approaches to problem solving. There is no time to be theorizing about how demons and ghosts and things that are out of this world are having an impact, because we need to focus on what's happening right now in front of us. There's no space for anything else. And so when you do hear stories coming out of the military that are paranormal in nature, it isn't that you should inherently believe them, but rather you should understand that if they have come to the conclusion that this is paranormal, they have ruled out virtually everything else. And so today I'm going to share a military paranormal story that happened in Afghanistan in 2009 when 8...
Oh my God. Juggo, Willie.
U.S. Marines were stationed at this very isolated observation post in the middle of Helmand province, and some very strange things happened out there that the Marines that were there believe are still
Mr. C, nice British old boy,
plaguing them to this day. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, I would encourage you to play Ding Dong Ditch on the like button's house, and then also subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Oh shit, that was fucking loud.
In June of 2009, US and NATO forces surged into Afghanistan. Troop numbers escalated dramatically in preparation for this massive offensive against the Taliban. During this surge, a very small team of Marines, 8 Marines, were given a mission to go to an observation post in Helmand province, where a group of British soldiers were stationed at the time. An observation post, or OP as it's called in the military, is any location where you're able to observe, hence the name. Most OPs, if not all OPs, are located on high ground because that provides you the best view. OPs...
Oh my God, Juggle Willie!
are very strategically valuable. You have the higher ground and you can see what's going on around you. And so as a result, OPs become prime targets for attack. Now, the OP that these Marines were going to, OP Rock, was a little bit unique. It was strategically very important, but it didn't really have the higher ground. All around it were other large pieces of terrain, which meant if you poke your head up for too long, you might get shot from a sniper on the mountain. And so OP Rock was like a very dangerous and isolated place to be. Not to mention laughably small and had almost no amenities. It was basically a couple of HESCO barriers, those big brown squares that get filled with sand and dirt to stop bullets, and then, not even cots. They slept literally on the ground on sleeping pads and a couple of ghillie tents overhead. That was about it. And so these Marines were going to be there for 60 days, where they were not going to be able to go anywhere. They were just isolated and stuck on this tiny little wasteland in the middle of Afghanistan. The 8 Marines were led by Sergeant Green, and his second in command was Corporal Lena. The other 6 junior Marines were Zolik, Hoyt, Wilson, Parker, Smith, and Gibbs. After
I needed my beauty sleep, and I'm
driving their up-armored vehicles all
still uglier than fuck
the way through the snaking pass, they get to OP Rock, and the British soldiers are there anxiously waiting for them. Normally, anytime you turn over with any other unit, you do something called turnover operations, where because you're new to the area, you want to go out and do like a presence patrol or something to get a feel for the area with the people who have been there, to kind of give you a lay of the land and say, hey, look out for this area. We think there's IEDs over there. Remember, if you're over here, you're in plain sight of the enemy. They can shoot you. But when they got there, the British were so anxious to leave. They did not do turnover ops. The British just looked totally weathered and beaten down and ragged, like they'd been fighting at OP Rock for decades. But they'd only been there for 60 days, the same amount of time that these Marines are about to be there. And before they leave, one of the British soldiers turns and says, hey, just so you know, if you dig anything up here, just put it back. And the Marines look at him like, what are you talking about? And he doesn't elaborate. He just says again, if you dig anything up, just put it back. Trust me. So that night, the men have settled into their new home for the next 60 days. And the way it works on any base in the world, but certainly in a war zone, is there's always someone manning a guard post. And so the first night, it happened to be Corporal Lena's turn to be on watch. Corporal Lena is the second in command of these 8 Marines. And he was up in the guard tower, and you got to put yourself in his mind, okay? Even if you've never been to Afghanistan, just imagine being out in the
Owen's only working long. Nice for you to stop by.
middle of nowhere.
Let me know if you can hear it still.
Like in the middle of a mountainous desert with no village, no people, no anything. But at the same time, you are hanging it out there. You are totally exposed. There are people in the mountains around you that want to kill you, for sure. And it's you and 7 other sleeping people right in your little tiny OP. All you got is a radio where you can call back to your main base that's far enough away that if something bad happened, you better hope that 1, you can get through to them, and 2, they can get over here as quickly as they can. And the great fear when you're in these remote locations is that you're going to get ambushed. There's so many stories about these complex attacks being launched on these small little outposts where all of a sudden groups like these 8 Marines just get totally overrun by the Taliban. So it's a terrifying thing. When I was in Afghanistan, I didn't stand all that much guard duty, but when I did...
Ellie, what? I didn't see the question.
You know, you're up in the shack and you're kind of looking out into this like vast expanse of kind of nothingness. And you're wondering, like, are people watching me right now? You know, is someone taking aim at me right now? I mean, you're protected and you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but nighttime in Afghanistan, standing guard duty, it's very eerie. And so this first night, Lena is up there, it's very quiet, and his radio that's right next to him, like imagine like a big walkie-talkie, right? Military grade radio, it starts crackling. Military radios, at least American military radios, are from the 1950s and they have basically not changed. They're very durable and they work. But it's not uncommon for them to falter, and that's why we have people that specialize in just radios that can fix these things for us. Because if you lose your line of communication, you're screwed. And so he's sitting there and he starts hearing crackling on the radio. And so he notices it, but he doesn't think much of it. And the crackling stops, and he's looking out into the mountainside, and he's kind of looking around and just doing his typical guard duty. Then the crackling picks up again, and he thinks he can hear someone speaking in the radio. It didn't sound like English. It didn't sound like even words necessarily, but it was a little bit louder. Now he's really paying attention to it. Because he was worried his radio might be going bad, he first took the battery off, looked at it, blew it off, reconnected the battery, rebooted it, and put it back down. And he's a little more keyed into his radio. And then a couple minutes later, he hears this crackling, and now he can clearly hear someone's voice. And it sounds like Russian. He thinks someone is speaking in Russian. This is an encrypted radio. You're not picking up random signals all over the place. You only are picking up people that have your crypto. And it doesn't make any sense to pick up somebody else's voice. This has to be someone on your team. And so he thinks, okay, I'll check in with the main base because my guys are all asleep right here. They're all sleeping right there, 7 of them. There's no beds. They're laying on the ground right there. I can count them. No one's on the radio. So he picks up the radio and he calls into the main base and he says, hey, is anybody pushing traffic out this way to OP Rock? And like right away, they get a response from the main base that says, no, we're not pushing or receiving traffic. Lena's not terrified about this, but he's like, okay, there's something going on with the radio. The crackling and gurgling and weird sounds would persist throughout the night to the point where the next morning when the next guard came on duty, he said, hey, I think there's something strange going on with the radio. You should probably go switch it out and get somebody else's radio while you're up here. Lena's relieved of guard duty and he goes down to check on the other Marines. And at this point, everybody's awake and, you know, it's the start of their first full day at OP Rock. And because they have nothing nothing else to do besides defend it, they start taking stock of how well fortified is it, what are some ways that we can improve this place, and they notice that there's a trench dug around the inside of OP Rock, basically right up against the Heskos, that allows anyone to stand and not be jutting out of the OP and run the risk of getting shot by a sniper. And they're looking at it and they're thinking to themselves, it's not deep enough. It's maybe a couple feet down. You're certainly not going to be able to stand on this trench. You'll totally be exposed. And they thought, why didn't the British, who were here for 60 days, why didn't they dig a deeper trench? And so Lena and the rest of the Marines decide they're going to spend that day digging the trench a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. As they're digging, Lena hits something metal in the trench. And he pulls it out, and it's like this metal stake, like an engineering stake. And he brushes off the dirt on the stake, and he's looking at it, and he can see some foreign writing, and it looks like Russian writing. And he's thinking to himself, oh, that's not that weird. Back in the 80s, the Russians were here, and it's totally possible that they may have left some of their gear here, and it got buried. About 10 meters away from Lena is one of the younger Marines named Wilson, who's digging, and at some point he hits the ground, and like a pocket in the soil opens up. And he sees there's some pottery and some pieces of what look like ceramics that are inside of this hole. And after pulling out some of the plates and pots, they pull out a huge human bone, a femur, your leg bone. They ultimately decide to tuck the leg bone back into where it was, and they stop digging in that area, and they continue to dig in the other sections of the trench. But they couldn't dig more than a couple inches before running into more human remains. And by the end of the day, they had unearthed dozens of skeletons inside of this trench. And so they realized that this is probably what the British meant when they said, if you dig something up, put it back. A couple of weeks go by, and the Marines at this point have accepted that they live in a very creepy place. And on day 13 of being at OP Rock, Hoyt, who had just turned 20 years old, is up on guard duty. As he's sitting there, he starts getting this really uncomfortable feeling that someone is right behind him. And so at one point, he turns around to look at what's behind him, basically looking back into the camp itself. And now, coming from outside the wire where he had just been looking, he hears this horrible, blood-curdling scream. He turns around and he's looking out. He's got his night vision goggles on. He's looking around for anything. And all of a sudden, a couple hundred meters away, he sees a man running between one bush to another bush. Now, they know that at any time they could get attacked. So they're not thinking that this could be anything other than the Taliban coming to attack them. And so the other Marines have jumped up because they heard the scream, and they're looking to Hoyt to be like, what's going on? Hoyt is saying to them, I got a guy, he's about 200 meters away. I just saw him running right to left. Lena runs over to the edge of the Hesco, and he raises his rifle with a thermal imager on it, and he's looking out, and there's no heat signature out there. It's totally cold. There's no animals, there's no people, certainly, there's nothing. And Lena is yelling to Hoyt, where is he? Where do I need to look? And Hoyt's saying, he's right there. I just saw him go behind that bush. But Lena is looking out and he can't see anything on thermal. And he's like, I don't see anything. There's no one out there. The Marines also had a dog that they inherited from the British soldiers that had been there. Her name was Ugly Betty. They loved Ugly Betty. They took care of her, and she was apparently really good at identifying when people were coming towards the OP. So she was a great watchdog. And this whole time, she had been looking in the same direction that Hoyt had seen this figure, and she is barking like a maniac. And even after they're looking with thermal and they can't see anyone out there, they can't get Betty to calm down. She's completely transfixed on the area where Hoyt had seen this figure. So for the rest of the night, the Marines are totally on guard, anticipating at any moment that they're gonna get attacked. Someone's gonna take a shot, they're gonna throw a grenade in, because we lost this guy who was right there in front of us. So eventually, the next day, when they didn't get attacked, they just kind of said, okay, and they moved on and just figured it was an anomaly. Another couple of weeks later, on day 26, Zolik, who's another one of the younger Marines, was on guard duty, and it was really hot. He remembers even taking his helmet off because he was sweating so bad. And then at some point, while he's just looking out into the vast open nothingness, he said that the temperature dropped inside of the shack dramatically. So much so that he actually felt cold. There was no breeze, there was no reason for it to be getting cold. And as he's thinking to himself, like, is there a storm coming in or a cold front coming in? He starts feeling like someone's standing behind him. And he keeps looking over his shoulder and no one's there. He's in this tiny little shack. And he's feeling creeped out, and all of a sudden he starts hearing whispering from behind him. Not on the radio, but like in the shack with him. And he keeps turning around and he keeps thinking like, am I hearing things? Am I losing my mind? And he starts hearing footsteps on the roof of his shack. And that's
Damn, that would be what the
so he
hell?
thinks, oh, Smith, who was the kind of class clown of the group, is playing a joke on me. He must be whispering outside. I bet he climbed up on top and he's screwing with me. So he jumps out of the shack and looks up, expecting to see Smith standing on the roof of the guard shack. But no one's on the guard shack. At this point, Zolik's pretty spooked. He does a quick search on either side of the guard shack, thinking maybe Smith is there, but no one's there. And then he turns around and, of course, sees that the other 7 Marines are all asleep. So it wasn't Smith. It wasn't any of his teammates. At this point, he goes back in the shack.
Kid, nice for you to stop by. Have a good nap.
And he raises his rifle and he's looking through his thermal scope. So any human would light up like a Christmas tree if you saw them on a thermal. And he's scanning outside all around thinking, did I hear someone who's out there? Because they had that weird run-in 2 weeks earlier with that random person that they could never find. He's thinking maybe there's somebody else out here. And as he's scanning, he sees a man standing a couple hundred meters away with his fists raised like this. Zolik was so caught off guard from the way he was standing that he actually lowered his rifle to look because the moon was pretty bright. The illumination was pretty good. And he looked, he couldn't really see him again, so he brought his rifle back up, and now through his thermal, the figure was gone. Zolik in interviews has admitted that he was really stressed out about being at OP Rock. He was really down. I think of all the Marines there, he was depressed. He did not want to be there. He felt like he was experiencing real combat fatigue. And he thought at this moment that he's losing his mind between the whispering and the footsteps on the roof and seeing this person with his fist raised. And so instead of telling people that he had potentially just seen this person out along the perimeter of their OP, he started to convince himself that you're just losing your mind. You're stressed and you're hallucinating. You just gotta calm down. For the rest of the night, he would not see the figure on his thermal or anybody out there, but he would hear whispering behind him.
Oh yeah, squirt me. SJB.
He kept hearing
With the blowhole.
footsteps on the roof, but he would go out and no one would be there. So by the time the sun came up, he really thought that he was kind of losing his mind.
Wow, that was bad.
And so he went to his leadership, Sergeant Green and Corporal Lena, and he told them about what had happened the night before, about, seeing the figure that had disappeared and hearing these whispers and the footsteps. I mean, he really thought that he was losing it, and he requested to be transferred, and they granted it to him. And the other 7 Marines were really upset about that. They felt like he was kind of abandoning them, and they were really critical of the reason for him leaving. They're like, oh, you're just playing the crazy card. You're just making that up so you can leave this crappy place that we don't want to be here either. So they were not taking seriously what he claimed happened. They just believed he was using the crazy card to get out of being at OP Rock. Just a couple of days after Zolik's departure, Lena is on guard duty in that guard shack, and as he's looking out, Ugly Betty starts barking really aggressively towards the area that Lena is looking at. And so he raises his night vision goggles and he's scanning the mountainside looking for any sign of people that perhaps Ugly Betty has sensed. And he stops when he sees what he believes is a Taliban scout standing on the mountainside, who's pretty far away, a few hundred meters away, and he switches to his thermal scope to confirm that it's a person before he engages. And when he raises his thermal scope, there's nobody there. There's no heat signature anywhere. But Ugly Betty is still barking like a maniac in the direction of where this potential scout was standing. And so Lena goes back to his night vision goggles like a second later, and he's looking, and he sees the same scout, now about 100 meters closer to him, way closer to him. Like impossible to cover that distance in that amount of time. He practically falls over when he sees it. He switches to his thermal and he's getting ready to engage, but there's nothing there. And this is all happening in a matter of seconds. He goes back to his NVGs and he's looking and there's nothing there. And as he's about to go to his thermal for one last look, he feels a tap on his shoulder, which he believes is going to be one of the other Marines that must have heard him frantically moving around in the guard shack. And when he turns, there's no one there. There's no one anywhere near the shack. All 7 are asleep in the middle of the camp. At this point, Lena felt bad because he was critical of Zolik, who had left because he had heard voices and seen apparitions out in the distance. And here's Lena, the second in command of the group, having the exact same experience. But over the next 10 days, Hoyt, Smith, and Wilson would all have very similar experiences in that guard shack. And after a while, they all began sharing their stories, and they all realized that Zolik probably wasn't lying, and we were unfair to be critical of him because we've all experienced this now. Then on day 59, the day before they're scheduled to leave, All of their radios go dead, all of them. And Lena goes over to Gibbs, who was their comms guy, and he's like, what's going on? And Gibbs was like, I've been working on the radios this whole time we're here. I've changed nothing. They've always worked. Now, they did have a satellite phone, but it was an unreliable way to get in touch with reinforcements if you really needed it. They're pretty much isolated at this point, and they're all just sitting there, just hoping they can get through one more night without any problems. Wilson is the one actually in the guard shack, and then all of a sudden, machine gun fire opens up right outside of their base.
Hey, Rick Gillespie, nice very distraught boy.
Wilson is totally caught off guard. He has no idea where it's coming from. He's trying to call it out to the guys where they're getting shot from, and all of the Marines are scrambling to the walls. They're taking cover behind the Hescos, and as they're laying there, Lena runs up into the guard shack with Wilson. He's like, grabs him, and he's like, where are they shooting us from? And Wilson's like, I have no idea. And it's like, it's so loud. There's all this gunfire coming in at them. And as Lena and Wilson are trying to figure out where this is coming from, they hear the distinctive sound of an RPG being fired at them. It's a rocket-propelled grenade. It's like a whistling sound, and they know it's going to hit them at any moment. The two of them brace for impact, and they hear the sound of this RPG smashing inside of the OP, and the machine gun fire is just continuing. It's a non-stop. And so a couple of the other younger Marines basically low-crawled their way into the trench where they were protected from these rounds, and they're thinking, like, we got to make sure no one's in the trenches. And so they start clearing the trenches, but no one's in the trench. And it's just this constant barrage of gunfire. They have no idea where it's coming from. And then just as suddenly as it started, the gunfire stops and it's silent. As soon as the shooting stopped, the Marines did not just poke their head up and say everything's fine now. If you're being shot at, you assume that even if there's a break in the gunfire, they're going to start shooting at you again. And so for hours, they're just like waiting for the next round of fire to start, but they don't even know where it's coming from. And they're kind of isolated and exposed. So they're all just kind of like hunkered down against the Hescos waiting to respond to the next volley of fire. But it never comes. And when the sun comes up, they're able to take stock of the damage to their OP from all the machine gun fire and from the rocket-propelled grenade. But there's no damage. No one had ever been...
What the hell?
...shooting at the OP. There was no damage. So they had no explanation for it. So when reinforcements arrived, they just wanted to pack their stuff up and get the heck out of there. And they did. After leaving OP Rock, very shortly after, Smith, Parker, and Diggs, 3 of the 8 Marines that were there, were all killed in Afghanistan in separate instances.
Hey, rage-filled version. Nice for you to stop by.
And then Sergeant Green, who was their leader, was very badly injured in an IED blast. Lena believes that when they were digging out those trenches and finding all those bones, that they unleashed something. It turned out a lot of people had lost their lives on that little strip of rock. When the Russians invaded Afghanistan, they captured OP Rock and killed all of the Mujahideen that were located at OP Rock. Then the Taliban came in and they took back OP Rock from the Russians and killed all the Russians that were at OP Rock. Then Americans came in and took back OP Rock from the Taliban, killing all the Taliban that were there. So you have all these people, probably dozens and dozens of people that at one point have been holding OP Rock, that had all been killed at OP Rock. And so Lena believes that it's only a matter of time before this curse that they unleashed comes back to get him. So I'd love to get your reaction. What do you think happened at OP Rock? Is this paranormal, or is there a rational explanation for this? Let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back.
That was crazy. Crazy story. All right, let's do some other stuff. Let's see. I have a lot of good stuff.
Today,
let's do a croc attack. There we go.
We take a look at one of the most terrifying saltwater crocodile attacks in history. The tragic tale of a young woman named Isabel Von Jordan, who overstepped into crocodile territory, leading her to meet her horrifying fate in the jaws of a massive crocodile. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying crocodile attack on Isabel von Jordan. Welcome to Final Affliction. From the name itself, salties, as Australians would call them, are distinct from other species because they tend to occupy salt water. Although other crocodile species have salt glands that would allow them to survive, they don't venture into the ocean as much as saltwater crocs. Using powerful sea currents, these creatures travel long distances from rivers to the open ocean. In Australia, researchers took 20 salties and tagged them with tracking devices to monitor their movement. They were able to
I'm sorry, Decon.
follow one of the crocodiles traveling 375 miles in 25 days from the North Kennedy River to the Gulf of Carpentaria. By allowing the
God, they're like dinosaurs.
currents to take them,
They're like living dinosaurs.
the salties can conserve much
Crocs.
energy and float
Crocs
along
and sharks
with the
are
current.
like fucking
Although most
ancient.
crocodiles are lethargic and would
Snakes,
prefer
too.
to bask in the sun during the day to hunt at night, saltwater crocs are different. These powerful creatures are one of the most active and aggressive crocodiles, who choose to cruise actively in water both day and
Oh,
night.
fuck that!
In
Get
fact,
away!
They would spend so much time at sea that researchers have observed
That's an alligator.
barnacle growth on the backs of some of the crocs, indicating the long periods, perhaps weeks.
See how you can tell the difference between a gator and a croc? Croc has a narrow note, like their snout is more narrow, and alligators like this
would spend
See, that's a good picture. See how narrow it is? That's a croc.
so much time at sea that researchers have observed
Yeah, see, now that's a gator because it's fatter. It's more rounded.
barnacle growth on the backs of some of the crocs, indicating the long periods, perhaps weeks,
And plus, crocodiles have more teeth exposed too
they
than alligators.
spent at sea. During the
See,
early 1900s, saltwater crocodiles were hunted in Australia for their meat, eggs, and skin. They were considered the most economically valuable crocodile species. Of course, these had repercussions as unregulated hunting pushed the crocodiles into near extinction. By 1971, the population of
you're stopping by one of those weirdos.
these creatures was reduced by 95%. However, after becoming a protected species, saltwater crocodiles are making a comeback. Unfortunately, this return in population involves human attacks as well. Amongst crocodile species, saltwater crocodiles have the most
What? Oh, dude, this guy's fucked.
tendencies to eat humans venturing
God
into
damn
their
it.
territory. Because these creatures are insanely powerful, fast,
Oh my
and
God.
violent, the
Oh,
chances of
shit.
surviving an
Oh, look at
attack
that death roll. Look at that death roll.
insanely powerful, fast, and violent, the chances of surviving an attack are incredibly slim. Most experts believe the attacks are territorial in nature, as salties even attack intruding boats. Nevertheless, predatory attacks do occur, such as the unfortunate case of Isabel von Jordan. On October 12, 2002, 23-year-old Isabel was with her sister Valerie and a few other backpackers in Sari Club, Bali. The two sisters were students from Heidelberg, Germany, out on a holiday trip, trying to enjoy their free time together in a different country. Sari Club was an open-air bar that drew tourists from around the world, mainly due to its ambiance and laid-back vibes. Wanting to experience the nightlife in Bali themselves, Isabel
Some of them were, but I think this story is about a saltwater crocodile.
and Valerie went there to drink and dance to the loud music. However, at around 10 p.m., the two sisters decided it was time to go. They hurriedly finished their drinks and went out of the bar, leaving the crowded place in search of a quieter atmosphere. An hour later, disaster struck at the bar. A car strapped with a bomb had been parked near the club as a form
Wait,
of terrorist attack.
What is happening? I thought we were talking about a crocodile.
killing 202 people and injuring
Jesus.
209. Hearing about the news, the two sisters immediately flew from Bali to Darwin, the capital city of the Northern Territory in Australia. Upon landing, they rushed to the Royal Darwin Hospital to visit their wounded friends who had been evacuated from Sari Club. Barely escaping the blast and seeing the injuries the incident had done to their friends, the two acknowledged how lucky they were. In wanting to forget the terror of such a horrific incident, Isabel and Valerie decided to relax in Kakadu National Park. Kakadu National Park is one of the largest national parks in Australia and is widely recognized in the world.
There's Krusty.
Having one of the most diverse wild...
Oh, shit. God damn, that's scary that. Due to large saltwater
wildlife.
Jesus.
The expansive mangrove-lined coasts, boundless floodplains, and wetlands of Kakadu National Park make it an ideal location to re-establish a connection with nature.
Oh, that was a
make
rock.
it an ideal...
I thought that... I scared, like, I got scared there for a second. I thought that was like a crocodile there for a second.
Location.
And the dude was like swimming towards it. And I was like, what are you doing? It does look like it.
To re-establish a connection with nature. Besides wanting to forget the bombing, Isabel and Valerie thought traveling in the Australian outback was a safer way to spend the remainder of their vacation. Unfortunately, Isabel's luck would run out, and going to the park
I'm just a cockadoo.
would be a grave mistake. Wanting to experience the stunning beauty of the Australian wilderness,
It's my finishing move, the cockadoo.
Isabel and Valerie embarked on a 4-day tour with 9 other tourists. They were led by Glenn Robles, a 46-year-old guide working for the Gondwana Adventure Tours. Everything went great, and the pair enjoyed their trip thus far. However, the unraveling of the two sisters' lives began when October 22nd arrived, just 10 days after they barely escaped the bombing in Bali. It was a quiet evening filled with laughter as Isabel and Valerie hung out with the rest of the tourists. At around 10:30 p.m., one of the tourists suggested they freshen up and go for a night swim. Their guide, Glenn, told everyone he knew just the right place. It was Sandy Billabong, a campground with fresh water in the heart of Kakadu. Upon arriving, the campers were eager to enter the water, thinking it was the perfect spot for a quick dip.
No.
However, some of the tourists were concerned about the signs, several of which warned incoming visitors about the crocodiles in the area. Glenn quickly dismissed this, assuring everyone that the waters were safe and that only
Oh yeah, look at this asshole. Oh yeah, the waters are safe, guys.
harmless freshwater crocodiles were meandering in the area. No saltwater crocodiles were there, Glenn said. Additionally, he mentioned
When someone ever says this, and you just have that weird feeling that something is off, just don't do it.
that the Aboriginal people had been swimming here for years, which is indicative of its safety. Still, some of the tourists were not convinced. Glenn went over the water and used his torch to shine on the surface, showing the wary tourists there really was nothing lurking in the waters. The campers were finally satisfied with Glenn's explanation. After all, he had been a guide here for 13 years already. At around 11 p.m., some of the campers, including Isabel and Valerie, entered the water. Glenn left the camp to meet with another guide from a nearby...
Wait! He made those... What a fucking asshole. So basically he was like, oh yeah, go swim in here. And then left. What a fucking dick.
...by group, planning on inviting them for a swim. While...
God damn, I thought he would have at least been in. He was so anxious to get in. Fucking jump in there.
floating in the calm and peaceful waters of Sandy Billabong, The campers talked and shared laughs. There were a couple of them in the water, all within an arm's reach from each other. While they were busy talking with each other, a large saltwater crocodile emerged from underneath them. However, the moonlight was not enough to make the creature's presence known. After all, it was swimming a couple of feet underwater, just below the unwitting tourists. Then it happened. In one swift motion, the crocodile torpedoes through the water, hitting James, one of the tourists, in the leg like a freight train. However, the crocodile wasn't interested in him. Within seconds, the crocodile had grabbed hold of Isabel, pulling her by the leg toward the depths. She desperately tried to fight back and swim up, but she was no match for the powerful creature's jaws. Isabel was able to let out a scream, alerting James and Valerie. However, in a blink of an eye, she was nowhere to be found. Initially, the group thought it was a prank by one of the tourists. However,
Oh yeah, Don Shipley, he's a good. I love watching some of his videos, busting phonies. There's a lot of them. Oh, don't tell me this froze. Oh shit, my laptop is running high. Yeah, so my video is froze. Give me a second. I'm gonna try to fix that with a basket. Give me 1 second, y'all. Oh my god. Actually, yeah, my shit is all froze. I'm gonna end the stream right now. Um, I don't know why my everything is frozen, right? Like, yeah, I'm trying to fucking. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna end the stream real quick, and then I'll be back later tonight, y'all. So, thanks for stopping by. I'll be back later. Hopefully they get this shit figured out.